I've had 3 blood clots so far, but none of them really fit the more typical, obvious symptoms that I had learned about on things like blog posts or YouTube videos. And so in this video, I want to share with you the symptoms that I actually experienced before going to the doctor. And then at the end of the video, I want to share with you some other unusual and less obvious symptoms that I've learned about from other blood clot survivors. Before I discovered the first blood clot in my leg, which is known as a deep vein thrombosis or DVT, the research that I did told me that the symptoms that I should look out for are things like pain, swelling, warmth, or redness in my leg, usually around the calf area. But as it turns out, none of those symptoms actually applied to me, at least not in the beginning when the clot was most likely starting to form. Now, of course, there was some minor discomfort, which is what prompted me to start doing some research in the first place. But if you would have looked at my leg at that time, you would have probably told me that everything looked completely healthy and normal. Okay, so what are these symptoms that I experienced? The first was a strange feeling in my calf muscle. If you've ever had a muscle cramp before from something like swimming, running, or hiking, you know that the cramp itself is this intense, writhing pain that forces you to stop what you're doing, sit down, and massage it out, or just try to wait for it to pass. But you've probably also experienced the feeling right before this happens. This is the tingly, constricting feeling that you get in that little 3 to 5 second window when you can tell that a cramp is about to happen, and it gives you just enough time to stop and shake it out before it becomes a painful, full-blown muscle cramp. That's what my leg felt like. It felt like an impending cramp that never came. I also want to point out that the sensation that I had was localized to one pinpoint spot, in my case, at the top of my calf and just below the knee. And this was concerning because I figured if it was something like a muscle or tendon issue, the discomfort would probably be felt a little bit more broadly across my leg. It also felt very internal, like that weird tightness wasn't on the muscle itself, but instead was like buried deep inside my leg where I couldn't reach it. Now, at first I thought I had strained something, so I tried to rest, stretch it out, ice it, and massage it. But instead of getting better over time, the feeling kind of lingered and eventually became a little bit more intense over the coming days. It was only about a week later that it actually became painful, at which point I went to the hospital. But it's important to point out that even then, there was still no redness, swelling, or warmth like people tell you to expect. Now I want to talk about the symptoms I felt before the pulmonary embolism that I had in my right lung, because again, the symptoms that I experienced were different than the ones that I had read about online. Now, when a blood clot reaches your lungs, most sources will tell you to look out for things like chest pain, shortness of breath, or coughing up blood. Now, these sound extreme because these are the warning signs that a blood clot is reaching a critical point where it can become fatal. But the symptoms that I had were so subtle that I almost went to sleep instead of going to the hospital. The first symptom was lightheadedness. Now, this is a symptom that you might see on websites and YouTube videos, but the reason that I felt that it was unexpected was because of just how brief it was. I was lying in bed and had this quick feeling of lightheadedness that lasted for just a second and then disappeared. In fact, it was so brief that it could have easily been dismissed. The reason I did take it seriously is because I had just been diagnosed with a DVT 2 days before, so I was already on high alert, plus the fact that it happened when I was doing nothing but scrolling on my phone. Now, the next symptom of a pulmonary embolism that I had was very interesting. I recently read a survivor story on the Instagram page of a nonprofit that I follow called the National Blood Clot Alliance. But in this post, a woman described one of her pulmonary embolism symptoms as an impending feeling of doom. And looking back on it, that's actually not a bad way to describe what I felt too. After the lightheadedness I mentioned, my whole body had this strange, uneasy feeling. It's really hard to describe, but it was like this nervous energy that felt a bit like I had taken too much caffeine. It also felt like it was lowering my blood pressure and making me feel a little bit queasy. It might sound a bit strange or funny, but it just somehow felt like my body wasn't happy and was looking for help. Now, it was 2 a.m. at this point, and I did not want to spend the next 5 hours in the emergency room. But this was the symptom that told me that I needed to take action and look out for myself. It somehow felt very intuitive, even though I don't usually think of myself as a very intuitive person. Okay, so those are the symptoms that I experienced. A kind of weird pre-muscle cramp feeling in my leg, a really brief 1-second feeling of lightheadedness as I was just lying down scrolling on my phone, and this weird feeling of impending doom or nervousness or just intuitive feeling that something was off. Lastly, I want to talk about some other unusual symptoms that other blood clot survivors have described. And the easiest way to do that is on the Instagram page of the nonprofit that I told you about, the National Blood Clot Alliance, which goes by the handle Stop the Clot. So you should definitely check them out. Okay, so this is their Instagram page, and let's scroll down and look for some of the posts that they made specifically from survivors of blood clots. Some of the first ones that you can see here have very typical symptoms of pulmonary embolism or blood clot in your lungs, like chest pain or shortness of breath. But then here's one that has a couple of more typical symptoms that you'd hear about on all kinds of websites, but also one that is a little bit more unexpected to me, which is back pain. This can be really confusing because you'll spend time thinking that you need to stretch or you've slept wrong, but in actuality, it could be a clot. And here are a couple more. One of them says severe back pain. I also want to point out that a lot of these that you'll see, the risk factor is estrogen-based contraception. So if you're a woman watching this, be aware that there are at least a couple of risk factors that are specific to women and maybe not as widely known as they should be. Here's another one citing back pain again. And I also want to point out that this person and the one I just showed both appear to be very young. And I think that's one of the things that people are finding out nowadays, which is that blood clots can happen in seemingly young and healthy people. And in fact, if you read through more of these stories, you'll see so many people writing about how they went into their doctor and they went undiagnosed for a long time because the doctor and the nurses didn't think to check for blood clots because they thought the patients were too young to have them. Here's another one that has severe back pain listed as a symptom, as well as the risk factor of estrogen-based contraception. Here's that story I told you about with somebody describing this feeling of impending doom and also the chest and back pain. Another slightly unexpected symptom here is severe headache and blurred vision. And again, you'll see risk factors that are specific to women with birth control and pregnancy. And a couple more unexpected symptoms such as rapid heart rate and clammy hands. The trouble with these types of things is that these symptoms can be indications of so many other different things as well. So it's really difficult to know if these symptoms are caused from blood clots or from something else, which is why it's really important to also observe the risk factors and see if you fall into any of those categories. March is Blood Clot Awareness Month, and I created a fundraiser with NBCA to continue their work spreading awareness about blood clots. So it would mean a lot if you checked out my donation page and donated a couple bucks. And if you live in Hawaii or North Dakota, these are the only 2 remaining states needed in order for the NBCA to have advocates in every single state reaching out to their Congress members about blood clot education and awareness funding. All you have to do is visit the link in the description and put in your address. Anyways, thanks for watching everyone, and stay safe out there.